Now tonight, the government is downplaying the magnitude of the drought, saying the situation was not really a cause for concern, even as it announced that it had set aside about 2 billion shillings to respond. The National Drought Management Authority says there is no evidence that the 11 people who have died so far died of starvation. NTV's Seth Olale has more details of the government's response to the drought, laying waste to several parts of the country.
Images of frail people clinging to their fleeting lives, walking along the path of the dead and the dying. 11 people have succumbed to the drought that has threatened to wipe them out.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
But the government says the situation is not so bad.
It is important for Kenyans to know that we have sufficient food in the country. The food situation in the country is stable, and there should be no cause for alarm.
The National Drought Management Authority says the 11 deaths reported in the country were not as a result of drought.
Those deaths are linked to maybe sickness and other issues. So as far as we are concerned, we don't have any report that can directly link the deaths to drought.
Deputy President William Ruto, who chaired an emergency meeting with 4 cabinet secretaries to strategize on yet another response to yet another cycle of the perennial drought, announced that the government had already put in place plans to alleviate the suffering of thousands, staring starvation in the face.
Assessment has been going on by NDMA, the National Drought Management Authority, with other multi-agency and multi-stakeholder committee.
The Deputy President also defended the government's long-term response strategy in a response that seems to retrace familiar lines.
We did promise livestock insurance so that pastoralists, cattle keepers, can manage the condition of their cattle in a predictable way, and if pasture gets depleted, then they have the resources to buy feed for their livestock.
County governments have also been mandated to allocate emergency response funds to help ease the situation in the affected counties. About 1 million people in the country are food insecure. Out of these, 865,000 others from 13 counties may need urgent food and water. Marsabit, Garissa, Isiolo, Mandera, Wajir, Baringo, Kilifi, Tana River, West Pokot, Makueni, Kajiado and Kwale are among the most affected counties. Responding to the upcoming rainy season, the government has announced that it is constructing a total of 31 new dams while at the same time renovating the 4,000 existing ones. Seth Olale, NTV at the Office of the Deputy President, Nairobi County.
And on Opinion Count this evening, we're asking you, are you satisfied with the government's efforts to address the current drought? Are you satisfied with the government's efforts to address the current drought? SMS us your feedback to 20686 or tweet us on at NTV Kenya at Zeynab Ismail, that is Zeynab with a Z-E-Y. We'll be able to sample some of your thoughts in this bulletin and at the very end. Just to remind you of our opinion count this evening, are you satisfied with the government's efforts to address the current drought? Talk to us. We'll be able to sample some of your feedback during the course of this live broadcast or at the very end. And Turkana County remains in the grips of one of the worst droughts in recent history, and there seems to be no reprieve in sight. And despite talk of rising investment in agriculture, the county still struggles to feed her people. NTV's Lois Wangui visited one such irrigation project in the more fertile Turkana East region and reports that life is slipping away from such projects too.
Turkana East is an oasis of sorts, a source of life amid the death and devastation eating at other desert-like parts of the country. But life is also drying up in this spring, life slipping away from this major government project, which was meant to ease their food security challenges. The Morulem irrigation scheme now stands dead, the people who depend on it for nourishment walking down this very path. The government had promised to put up the Lowot Dam to irrigate the project's parched fields during the dry seasons, but that remains just that, a promise.
Hiyo ingekuwa suluhisho kwetu kwa sababu ya mashamba. Lakini ilipolonchiwa tumeongojewa.
At the moment, the invasive mathenge weed grows in place of food. The bread basket is now a dust bowl. There is also no hope from the skies. It hasn't rained for a year now.
So, kiangazi ni hatari na ni ghali mno kuliko na ingine. Ilikuwa ya 94. Ilikuwa ya 94 ndio tunaweza fananisha na hii wakati ilikuwa na njaa zaidi.
The government has promised 300 new dams across the country, but the residents of Turkana see it as yet another empty promise. For now, it is a big battle for survival that the residents here, like Mzee Mukuli Abalim, fear they might lose. He, his 2 wives and 9 children don't have enough to feed on.
Baada ya siku 3 tunalala na njaa. Baada ya siku 3 tunapata ingine kidogo. Kwa hivyo anasema anasikitikia kiangazi.
Her second wife needs nourishment to pass on to her 3-month-old baby.
Hii gari kama una petroli hauwezi kuondoka. Mpaka unaweka mafuta yake ndio taondoka. Kwa hivyo hata mwili yangu namna hiyo imeshindwa kabisa kuondoka kwa hapa.
The stronger among them have moved with their herds in search of water and pasture. For the children, school at least offers a chance and hope for a meal, but most of the school feeding programs also don't last the full 3-month term. It's usually just enough for a month.
Baada ya Ijumaa, sasa anaenda kukaa manyumbani. Sasa wakati anakaa manyumbani, kuna kitu kingine tena anakula. Anakaa tu paka kuanzia Jumamosi, Jumapili, Jumatatu anakuja shule. Sasa akikuja shule,
on this day, the Deputy President William Ruto has promised that the government is keenly following up on this drought matter and that help will come soon. It will be interesting for us to keep observing just how soon that help comes to Turkana County and how the residents of this county will be managing this prolonged dry spell that has lasted about 10 months. Lois Wangoi, NTV, in the county of Turkana.
And still on the drought situation in the country, more than 40,000 learners cannot get food under the regular school meal program after the World Food Program suspended food supplies in schools in West Pokot County. The situation has further deteriorated as a result of the ongoing drought. NTV's Sharon Baranga reports on how this has affected learning in a number of schools that face closure.
It is around 8 a.m. in West Pokot County. The journey is on. Ordinarily, for these students at Kapsimatia Secondary School, it is to class. However, on this occasion, they are out in search of water. The drought has affected learning in most schools within the county. The number of pupils and students reporting to schools has significantly dropped.
So, serikali kama kuna uwezekano ya kuweza kutusaidia wapate kusaidia hiyo jamii. Ndio pia tusaidie tupatie hao motisha ya kukubali kwenda shule. Sababu hata nami pia nilikubali kwenda shule kupitia uji tu. Mimi nilidanganywa na chakula na nikaendelea kuenda shule namna hiyo na nikapata elimu yangu.
More than 40,000 learners will have to go without food provided under the regular school meal program. This follows the World Food Program's suspension of food supplies in schools in the county. Schools like Lonyangalem, Kases and Takayua primary schools may soon be closed as the number of absent learners keeps rising. Some people have fled to neighboring Uganda in search of water and pasture for their animals. Dams and water pans have dried up, with North and Central Pokot being worst hit. The drought narrative has a chapter miles away in the county of Makueni. At Unoa Primary School, however, children go to school so as to feed.
Sometimes tunakaa, then we struggle to get money to feed them. They are mostly encouraged by when we have food, is when they come to school. But when you don't have, sometimes we find that some don't come.
The head teacher is concerned that the food may soon run out, rendering the school unable to feed the pupils. Unoa is one among many schools in Makueni which is affected by the drought, with the most affected areas being Kibwezi and Mboni. Sharon Baranga, NTV.
And away from that situation up north, police are investigating the circumstances in which city lawyer Asa Nyakundi fatally shot his son Joseph Nyakundi. The lawyer, who was taken ill after his blood pressure spiked, told the police that he accidentally shot his son on their way home from church yesterday. Forensic investigators were examining the car where the shooting happened amid rising speculation that father and son may not have been in the best of terms. Olive Barrows has more details into the investigations into Joseph Nyakundi's mysterious death.
Forensic investigators on Monday set about the business of collecting evidence in connection with Sunday afternoon's shooting of 29-year-old Joseph Nyakundi. High-profile lawyer Asa Nyakundi, who fatally shot his son in the chest, is recuperating at the Nairobi hospital following a spike in his blood pressure. The authorities also visited Nyakundi's Muthaiga home up the road from where the shooting allegedly took place. According to Nyakundi's statement to police, he unintentionally shot his son near the Judicial Training Institute on their way home from church. He claims that while driving, he reached back to retrieve his Glock pistol from the right pouch of the Toyota Axio they were riding in to holster it. It's in this effort, Nyakundi told the police when he reported the incident, that he accidentally discharged a round. The Glock was loaded with 15 rounds of 9mm ammunition. It is this account of events that police are investigating to determine the extent of Nyakundi's culpability. Among the things they are seeking to ascertain are 1, the state of the relationship between father and son, and 2, whether the forensic evidence corroborates the account on record. Among the questions that arise as far as the forensic evidence is concerned is if it was possible for Nyakundi's gun to discharge unintentionally, as has been claimed. The company that manufactures it says the gun has a safe, simple and fast system that allows the user to concentrate fully on shooting without having any additional actions to disengage and re-engage safeties. The safety on the gun, as depicted in this graphical representation, forming part of the trigger. And to fire, to quote the manufacturer, the trigger safety and the trigger itself must be deliberately depressed at the same time. Joseph Nyakundi's body at the Aga Khan mortuary should also provide clues on what transpired between father and son. Joseph was declared dead on arrival to the hospital. Olive Barrows, NTV.
And police in Nairobi are looking for a man who threatened to shoot a security guard in Kileleshwa over a parking spot row. The man, who had visited a tenant at one of the apartments in the area, drew his gun on the guard, who had insisted that the visitors park at the designated area. But the visitors resisted, leading to an altercation.
The events of the evening of Saturday the 16th of this month are still vivid to security guard Alex, not his real name, as vivid as they were captured on CCTV footage 2 days ago. Alex was just about to leave for the day when a tenant at this apartment block in Kileleshwa in Nairobi received visitors. As is the norm, Alex says he discharged his duties as he had for the last 4 years he has been stationed here.
Akajaribu kuweka kwa parking ya mwenyewe. Wakati nilifunga gate nikaenda nikamwambia umeweka gari kwa parking ya mwenyewe. Baada ya hiyo akaniambia akae juu anateremka tu saa hii. Nikamwambia hii gari utablokiwa mwenyewe, akikuja utablokiwa hii gari. Na hatataka kutoa hii gari. Akaniambia hii gari nikiblokiwa nitaipush itoke hapa hivi.
Huyu mama aliblock hii kari na akaenda kwa nyumba yake.
When the visitors to apartment 7A were done, they came to the parking lot, ready to leave, but couldn't. They had been boxed in, and that is where Alex's nightmarish 15 minutes started.
Wakaanza kuniuliza niwaambie mama watolee kari. Wakaanza kusema wataniua, wataua huyu mama. Sasa mimi kwanza kusikia hiyo maneno wataua mama ama wataniua mimi. Nikaogopa kuita mama atoe kari kwa parking yao.
The visitors, abrasive, started hurling insults at him. But it wasn't just insults that were rained on him. Objects too followed soon after, prompting Alex to reach out for his baton or rungu. It would turn out to be a nearly costly mistake.
Wakatokelezea wakaanza kusema unatolea rungu, unatolea rungu. Nikaona mmoja anatokea na kan. Anza kunionyesha, we will kill you. Takuwa na tupotee, hakuna, hii ni Kenya, hakuna mwenye atatufanya chochote. Hata hiyo akaanza kunipika hapa na upio client akanipika hapo, wananionyesha kan. Sasa nikaa naogopa sana.
The altercation between the guards and the visitors lasted for about 2 minutes, the longest of Alex's life.
Tangu nianza kufanya hapa kazi sijawahi na kitu kama hiyo kunifanyikia. Na hisi naogopa sana, hata kwa nyumba nakaa naogopa, nikiingia kazi nakaa naogopa.
The visitors eventually left the parking lot, driving off in this vehicle registration number KCH001V, leaving behind a shaken and disturbed security guard, who has since reported the incident to the Kileleshwa police station. Officers there told NTV they are taking statements from the victim of the attack with the aim of establishing the identity of the gun holder, whether he is licensed, and the possibility of withdrawing the firearm over its blatant misuse.
And the Director of Criminal Investigations, George Kinoti, has fired back at Deputy President William Ruto and those criticizing his approach to the war on graft. Kinoti says he will not be intimidated, blackmailed or even beaten into submission by his detractors, who he says should brace themselves for even tougher times. Ken Mijungu reports.
The Director of Criminal Investigations, George Kinoti, appears to have been pricked by the hail of political accusations targeted at him and his anti-corruption strategy. He has fired back. Kinoti says he is unstoppable, hitting back at claims he has been sucked into a political scheme to undermine the implementation of the country's development projects. He says he's not about to back off the war on graft.
This war is going to continue, and even in a more, I mean, maybe expectation they never expected whatsoever from the one go. So we are not deterred whatsoever.
In what seemed like a well-rehearsed script, the DP and his allies dismissed his efforts, asking him to focus on petty crimes and leave the real work of fighting corruption to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. Kinoti, however, defended what he called his constitutionally backed mandate.
It gives the National Police Service express authority to fight corruption, expressly, not even by act of parliament.
Martin Olo, a governance expert and a lawyer, agrees with him and reads intimidation in the statements made by the DP and his allies.
It's intimidation. It is scaring him off and trying to tell him to go slowly. And the reality also is that this is also an approach that is too close for his comfort, and therefore he's kicking.
The leaders have accused him of skewed approach in his anti-graft war.
Nobody is fighting the DCI. We are only saying that we want to strengthen the fight against corruption by taking it to the officers that have the capacity and the know-how.
Wasiitikie kutumiwa na jama ya kisiasa. Tunawaunga mkono kama wa Kenya, lakini wasiitikie kamwe.
Any disagreement can be boardroom related, but not outside, not in the public. Any spat should be in the boardroom, not in the public. And in any case, the Deputy President can pick up a call and place it to DCI and say, look, the way you're going is not the right way. I would like you to do this because this is what the President and I want.
In an interview with the Daily Nation, Kinoti was firm about his resolve to win the war on graft that is backed by President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga. Ken Mijungu, NTV.
And traffic along Kiambu Road was interrupted as police battled a group of thousands of Kenyans scammed by Ekeza Sacco, who had blocked the way as they waited to record statements with the DCI. The huge crowd, which lost millions from the Ekeza Sacco and the Gakuyu real estate farm, had responded to DCI's calls to record statements against Gakuyu, hoping to get their money back. NTV's Lillian Kiarie was at the DCI and reports on the chaotic scenes outside and the desperation inside that drove the investors.
The thought of going back home empty-handed and with no hope of a way forward was too painful to take in for this despairing crowd. Their dreams crashed with the collapse of the Ekeza Sacco, where many had deposited their life's work.
Nilianza kusave nikiwa chokora. Niko na vitabu mbili kwa hii Ekeza. Yangu na ya mtoto. Yangu iko na 800 na ya mtoto iko na 55.
Mimi kazi yangu ni kuchoma mutura na mara mpaka kakuoka kila kitu, yani mimi nachoma mpaka panic iliswalioko. Kila siku nilikuwa nasema 500 mpaka ikifika mahali napeleka. Sasa imefika giri 100 na 175.
Na mimi nimevuta mkokoteni nikisave pesa kidogo kidogo.
Nilikuwa nafanya kazi Katani. Nilikuwa naamuka saa 10 na rara saa 8 ya usiku. Mahali ya kuku wa chakula for 2 years.
As the sun rose, a sea of distraught faces was already surging at the DCI headquarters. The thousands of them, hailing from Kiambu and Nairobi counties, had heeded calls to file their complaints against the Sacco. But with the numbers swelling as the day wore on, authorities instructed them to get into groups of 10. They were given sheets of paper to put down their names, phone numbers, the amounts they owed the scheme, and the money owed to them. But even this did not check the tide of desperate members flowing into the DCI headquarters. The DCI, in a bid to control the numbers, asked those from Nairobi County to return at a later date. But they would have none of it. Their desperation turned to open anger.
Nilikuwa member wa club ambao nilikuwa nimeinvest milioni 2.5, nimeinvest 750 kwa ploti ambayo hata haina hiyo value, lakini nishalipia na kupewa share certificate ambao tena naona anasema atauza ndio aweze kulipa watu wa Ekeza.
Mimi nilikula sport pesa, nikamletea hiyo pesa yote ati ninunue saba, angalia sasa amenyang'anya yote.
The ensuing chaos forced the police to fire tear gas to disperse the angry throng and restore normal traffic flow along the Kiambu Road. The pursuit of justice for thousands who invested in Gakuyu-related schemes continues, with no direct way forward from the Office of the Directorate of Criminal Investigations. The investors can only hope that the government intervenes. Lillian Kiarie, NTV.
All right, and that report there by Lillian Kiarie will be taking us to a short break. But before that, remember on our opinion count question tonight, we asked you, are you satisfied with the government's efforts to address the current drought situation? Are you satisfied with the government's efforts to address the current drought situation? And just to sample some of your views, I'm going to sample just two at this point. James Kimutai saying, we have maize stuck in stores all over the Rift Valley because of lack of market, while our brothers are dying in another part of the Rift. How does this happen? At Job Madhai saying, no, and a big one. The government isn't doing anything to address the drought issue. First of all, in the remote areas such as Pokot, Sambur, Turkana, the government must be serious. These are your sentiments, and of course we'll be taking a look at other feedback from you later on during the course of this live broadcast. But these are the images of Mozambique. We tell you why the weatherman says Kenyans should be concerned right after the break. and reported cases in its neighboring counties. The capital has raised its alert levels owing to proximity to the affected counties. Kajiado has 10 confirmed cases, while Narok County registered 9 people having positively tested for the illness. The two counties also recorded 575 and 85 suspected but not confirmed cases respectively. Nairobi had 8 suspected cases, which after tests turned out not to be cholera.
What we've been getting are suspected cases. Some of them have turned positive on RDT, but we've not had a confirmatory result, which is by culture, that has turned positive of cholera.
A Kenyan doctor studying in Cuba died on Sunday under unclear circumstances, with some reports indicating that he committed suicide. Dr. Ali Juma Hamisi, Likoni Member of Parliament Mishimboko's brother, was among the 50 Kenyan doctors sent to Cuba to study family medicine under an agreement between Kenya and Cuba. The Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Union has called for the termination of the Kenyan-Cuba deal, citing deplorable working condition for the Kenyans in the South American state. The union says the Kenyan government has failed to secure proper housing conditions, pay promised allowances and allow the doctors to reconnect with their families. KMPDU further adds that the deceased doctor had expressed his frustrations and wanted to exit the program. The government says the Kenyan embassy in Havana are working closely with the Cuban authorities in conducting investigations.
He had complained to me and he said that they're experiencing a lot of difficulties. The payment which they're getting is not what they were being told that they'll get. And there was a lot of mistreatment. He was talking a lot, and in fact, he had decided that enough is enough and he's coming back. He said that he will just come back. He doesn't need to study in Cuba anymore. That's the last conversation I had with him.
Quite unfortunate there. Now, Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i has called for the closer collaboration between Parliament and the Executive so as to fast-track bills pending in Parliament and government projects. Matiang'i spoke after a consultative meeting with Senate Speaker Kenneth Lusaka and Senate committee chairpersons at the Senate main chambers.
We are also going to have a Speaker's Kamkunji to have a comprehensive report on the Big Four agenda projects that the country is implementing, so that everybody is in the loop and in the know of what is happening. And we have said that the respective ministries develop new policies and projects. They will be forwarding their briefs to the chairpersons of the committees for information, so that again we are reading from the same script. So
our focus is on the implementation of development projects across the country, and we are all now facing in one direction in that particular respect.
And another caution, another caution about Kenya's debt and yet another Akibe underperformance.
note of food insecurity. As the pangs of hunger continue to bite in the counties of Turkana, Baringo and West Pokot, farmers in the North Rift region are still holding thousands of bags of maize in their stores from the previous harvest due to lack of market. Victor Kiprop now paints the tragic irony of scarcity amidst plenty.
Kenya's food security situation is a tale of two worlds. On one hand, a bumper harvest, overflowing food reserves and farmers' produce rotting away in their stores due to lack of market.
We have sufficient food stocks in the country. We have enough supply of food items in the country, and the prices are modest.
And on the other hand, possibly millions of people facing starvation in different parts of the country, with more than 10 people believed to have already died from the ravages of hunger.
Dunia hii yetu ni kwa chakula, hakuna kitu tunakulanga. Kama sahi sisi tunakula hii manini, ini vitu ya nini ya miti.
More than 1.1 million people in 13 counties are currently estimated to be facing starvation due to prolonged drought. But a few hundreds of kilometers away in Uasin Gishu and Trans Nzoia counties, the grain is slowly going to waste after the National Cereals and Produce Board capped how much it would buy from farmers at only 400 bags per farmer.
We are holding maize for 2017. We are holding maize for 2018. And there is no market for it.
Vile serikali walikataa kuchukua mahindi kwa bei nzuri, sisi tukafadhalisha kushaga tuwalishe ng'ombe nazo.
According to projections by the Ministry of Agriculture, farmers harvested a total of 46 million bags last year, up from 40 million bags harvested in 2017. Meanwhile, the 7 billion shillings Galana Kulalu project meant to ensure food security in the country has already collapsed as the contractor and the government squabble over payments. Victor Kiprop, NTV Business.
Quite a telling story there by Victor Kiprop. Economists speak about the demand-supply mismatch and the casualties in between. Moving on. Kenya will have to trade carefully in its borrowing even as developments in the global environment make external debt relatively more attractive. In its latest global outlook, Standard Chartered Bank expects to see rising appetite for bonds issued by economies such as Kenya in 2019, but warns that the risks attached to foreign currency are still rare. This comes even as the government is expected to issue a dollar-denominated bond to retire the 500 million shillings Eurobond maturing in June 2019. This caution comes against the backdrop of the reopened Emakiba infrastructure bond, which saw the government raise 197 million shillings out of the targeted 250 million shillings. The Capital Markets Authority has since approved the listing of the bond, allowing investors in the secondary market to trade in the same. A total of 60 million shillings has been paid out in Emakiba interest since the debut issuance in March 2017.
Bond yields, you're looking at 10-12% yields, so funding locally is not cheap. Obviously it's in your own currencies that you have some control over, so that's a positive. Often when you borrow money overseas you get it slightly cheaper, but obviously it's in a foreign currency, so it's just really trying to manage that risk.
The Consumer Federation of Kenya, COFEC, has filed a notice of appeal in light of the ruling issued by the High Court, which rendered the law capping interest rates unconstitutional. COFEC, which is the second interested party in the petition filed in October 2016, intends to appeal against the March 14th ruling, which found that Section 33B of the Banking Amendment Act of 2016 is unconstitutional, null and void. The law, which came into force in September 2016, has set a ceiling on lending rates, a fact which has been widely blamed for declining uptake of credit by the private sector. And let's take a look at the capital markets. And the Standard Group Limited is on its way to end the 3-year dry spell of no dividend payout to its shareholders as it reports an improved financial position in 2018. The group posted a net profit of 261 million shillings in the 12 months ended December 2018, a rebound from the 211 million shillings loss reported the year earlier. The return to profitability was enabled in part by a reduction in operating and financing costs, which dipped by 11% and 8% respectively. The board has recommended a dividend payout of 60 shillings per share following last year's results. And a look at manufacturing. Kenya is set to become the 21st country where global car maker Nissan manufactures its vehicles as the company looks to invest 2 billion shillings in a local assembly line. This will make it the 8th company to set up an assembling plant in the country. Here's Alex Mwangi with the details.
Kenya's automotive industry is said to be growing at an estimated 11% per annum and is projected to hit a motorization rate of 56% by the year 2030. Far outstripping Africa's rate of 42%. And with global vehicle manufacturers expressing interest in assembling locally, Nissan also wants a share of the pie. With Nissan having expressed interest in setting up an assembly line in Kenya, the onus is now on the Kenya government to set up a conducive environment with the automotive policy to enable it to do so, as this will enable the success of the Big Four agenda with regards to manufacturing.
Because it impacts every one of those other three agendas. So what is it that we need to do more is actually speed of execution. We have talked enough.
The government is working on a national automotive policy that will see, among other things, a reduction of the age of imported used cars from the current 8 years to 5 years later this year, then to 3 years by 2021.
So it'll mean safer cars on the road and it'll mean cleaner cars on the road in Kenya if there is this kind of limitation.
The policy requires the creation of an institutional, legal and regulatory framework for its implementation, failure to which Kenya's automotive sector could be confined to the doldrums. Currently, none of Kenya's 3 motor vehicle assembly plants utilize more than 35% of their capacity. The Associated Vehicle Assemblers in Mombasa has a capacity utilization of 35%. Isuzu East Africa Limited in Nairobi is at 23%, while the Kenya Vehicle Manufacturers based in Thika is at 2%.
KVM, I think, was built to assemble 6,500 vehicles a year, single shift. But if you look at our output now, we hardly do more than 400 vehicles in a year. So the business is really low.
Nissan will first assemble pickup trucks from semi-knocked down kits on condition that the government agrees to waive a 25% import tax. The company will submit a proposal to the government once market studies and due diligence assessments have been completed and may have an operational assembly line by the end of this year if it receives a green light. Alex Mwangi, NTV.
And that story by Alex Mwangi wraps up NTV Business Tonight. But coming up ahead, some love and care for orphaned elephants. The story of Mesha Kanzimbi on My Job.
Welcome back. Now, Meshach Nzimbi has been caring for orphaned elephants for the last 20 years. He likens the elephant calves he cares for with his children. On this week's My Job segment, Mel Miendo has a story of the elephant man.
At the David Sheldrick Elephant Orphanage in Nairobi is elephant keeper Meshach Nzimbi. For the last 27 years, he has taken care of elephant calves and loved them like his own children, quite literally.
Kazi yetu ni kuwapatia maziwa, kukaa na wao msituni, tunacheza kama vile wasasi wao walikuwa wanafanya kule msituni. Na jioni tunawapeleka kwa manyumba zao, wanaenda kulala na tunalala na wao tukiwapatia maziwa. Saa zingine unapata nikiongea, kwanza ukinipata peke yangu, napata nikiongea na wao ni kama wananijibu vile na wauliza.
Meshach is one of the 24 elephant keepers at the orphanage who has dedicated himself to the well-being of these animals. A job that begins with some degree of aggression on the part of the calves. Meshach says it takes time for the elephant calves to adapt to new environments when they're first brought in.
Lazima kuja akiwa akujui na lazima kusukume. Lakini utakaa naye baadaye atakuja kutulia.
The 28 elephant calves at the Sheldrick Wildlife Trust have been orphaned in one way or another, and as Meshach explains, each needs special care and attention.
Ukiwa na either kama ni mgonjwa unamweka on trip na utaweka mpaka asubuhi, na unajua pale hakuna kulala, lazima muangalie mpaka asubuhi.
It's all about learning on the job. As an elephant keeper, Meshach was not trained. It emanated from his passion for the elephants and quick observation of what other keepers did. He says it is of great help.
Ukikuja hapo kae na watu unaangalia, hii ni practical wako, unaangalia vile tunafanya, unaangalia kama unaweza. Kuna watu wengine wanakuja hapa naangalia hii kazi, anasema hapana, siwezi fanya hapa, na anatoroka anaenda. Kwa hivyo hii ni kazi nataka ujitoe mwanga, uwe ni mtu wa roho moja.
Time, effort and a genuine care for elephant calves is necessary for this job.
Hata ukiamuka utalala, lala toto, come on, sleep.
Meshach says it is more like parenting infants. You just can't take your eyes off them.
Mwezi ama masiku kufikia kama mwaka moja na nusu, hao wanataka mtu wawe anakaa na mtu, wawe anakaa na kipa kwa nyumba, kwa sababu ukiwaacha peke yao wanalia. Hawa kidogo kama huyu anaitwa Loicus, lazima hao wapewe maziwa kulingana na vile wanataka.
The space and environment the calves are in at the Sheldrick's orphanage is safe and becomes a home for them, but in a few years they are released to the national parks.
Wakitoka hapa wanakuanga na miaka 3 ama miaka 3 na nusu. Wanaenda kukaa kule kama miaka 5 hivi. Kwa miaka 8. Miaka 8 wenyewe wanaweza kuamua kama wataenda msituni ama waendi.
And even as the elephant calves grow, Meshach shares an interesting fact that showed these animals' innate abilities are quite similar to humans.
Wale ndovu nimewahi chunga wakubwa. Nikiwaita tukienda tupatane after 5 years. Ninakutana na wao na naweza kuongelesha na hata nifanya kitu. Kwa hivyo wako na akili kama mtu, wanakumbuka kila kitu. Kama umewahi kuwa kipa wanakukumbuka.
Meshach is hopeful that each of these elephant calves will have a bright future and will not fall into the ruthless hands of poachers. Mel Miendo, NTV.
And what a beautiful job he does there caring for those jumbos. We'll take a very short break here on NTV tonight. When we come back, Ida Waringa will be bringing you all the sporting action.
Very good evening to you and welcome to NTV Sport with me, Ida Waringa. Now, the National Olympic Committee could lose the proposed Nok Plaza situated in Nairobi's Upper Hill to the auctioneer's hammer. It's reported that Nok is buried in billions of shillings of debt. I visited the construction site earlier on today and filed this report.
Things are thick. Despite efforts to rescue the stalled construction of the National Olympic Committee of Kenya Plaza, the building has been put up for public auction. In an advertisement ran on the Daily Nation, the building, located in Upper Hill and which was to be a significant part of former NOC chairman Kipchoge Keino's legacy, has been put up for sale by Regent auctioneers under instruction from CDN Bank. The construction of the NOC Plaza, whose excavation work commenced in April 2012, stalled after CDN Bank, who had put in a reported 400 million shillings, discontinued. The proposed building, which has currently been constructed up until the 9th floor, was to have 16 floors, a rotating museum and a Hall of Fame, celebrating the achievements of the country's Olympians. It had been estimated that the NOC Plaza would cost 1.2 billion shillings, with CDN Bank being the main financier with 800 million. NOC would then take care of the remaining 400 million shillings. However, the Olympic body is yet to make good on its part of the agreement. In September 2018, NOC's General Assembly mandated the addition of more members to the Plaza's Building and Property Committee, which is headed by Kenya Volleyball Federation President Waithaka Kioni, in a bid to revive the stalled project. The current NOC office claims that besides the building's debt, they also inherited debt worth an estimated 75 million shillings from the Keino-led office. NOC Treasurer Anthony Kariuki informed NTV Sport that there will be an emergency meeting on Tuesday to address the issue. The committee is currently engaging the government for possible solutions and also looking for partners.
Conversation that he will be having. Our sign language interpreter this evening was David Agondoa, and I'm Zeynab Ismail. Good night.